Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly fascinating piece of commentary, simply titled The Renewing of the Mind. What we're doing here is taking a look at how this text takes what could easily just be treated as a highly abstract theological concept and translates it into an incredibly practical, concrete framework for facing adversity. If you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by a difficult situation and wondered how on earth you're supposed to process it, well, the source material we're unpacking today provides a very structured way of looking at that exact problem. Right off the bat, the author introduces this really powerful central metaphor. Every trial hands you two scripts. Basically, the exact moment a hardship arrives, and that could be a personal crisis, a professional setback, or some intense interpersonal conflict, you are immediately handed two distinctly different ways to react. You aren't just left floating in a void. A reaction is literally offered to you. And the text argues that the entire outcome of your adversity depends completely on which of these two scripts you decide to pick up and read from. Section 1. The choice of scripts. Deciding how to react in the moment. So the text presents a really stark duality here. First up, we have what the author calls the world's script. The source describes this script as fast, sensible, plausible, and pretty much always close to hand. It essentially tells you exactly how any reasonable person in society would respond to being wronged or challenged. But as the commentary points out by quoting the proverb, this is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Contrast that with the alternative, Scripture's script. The text notes impartially that this second script is radically different, primarily because it almost always takes longer to find. It isn't just an automatic reflex, it has to be actively sought out. Moving into Section 2, redefining renewal, what it actually means to change your mind. Okay, let's look at where this framework comes from. The author anchors this whole concept in a specific piece of historical text, using the words of the Apostle Paul from Romans 12:2. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. The commentary uses this scriptural anchor to frame the search for that alternative script, not just as, a minor behavior modification, but as a total mental transformation. If you really want to reject that default world script, the text argues that you must fundamentally undergo this rigorous process of renewing your mind. And the source explicitly states that renewing the mind is absolutely not about thinking less. It's not about emptying your brain or somehow turning off your critical faculties. Not at all. Rather, it's about being retaught what thinking is actually for in the first place. The text describes it as thinking by a totally different light. It's a process of being renewed in knowledge. You're quite literally trading one entire body of wisdom and one whole way of knowing for another. You are swapping out the default lens through which you view reality for a deeply historical, scriptural one. Section 3. The precedent. Nothing is new under the sun. This is where the source material takes a highly practical turn. And honestly, the court argument it makes here is incredibly grounding. It asserts that there is truly nothing new under the sun. Whatever you are going through right now, the text insists that your current struggles are not uniquely yours. The historical and scriptural record was written specifically for our learning, meaning the patterns of human behavior, suffering, and triumph, they already exist. The exact situations you are facing today have already been well documented and successfully navigated. So the crucial point is how we actually apply those patterns. When you face the betrayal, the false accusation, the long injustice, or even the temptation dressed up as an opportunity, a renewed mind stops asking, well, what does society say I should do about this? Instead, a renewed mind searches the word for these exact historical precedents. The author argues that instead of just instinctively reaching for that fast worldly script that merely seems right in the moment, the renewed mind learns to find the historical pattern in Scripture and applies its battle-tested response. It's effectively like looking up the answer key written by those who have already taken and passed the test. Which brings us to Section 4, the furnace of adversity, testing the scripts under pressure. To really illustrate this high-pressure test, the text introduces a second major scriptural anchor, this time from Sirach 2:5, acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. The author uses this incredibly powerful metaphor of a furnace to represent intense affliction and hardship. Because let's face it, it's one thing to talk about scripts and patterns when things are calm, right? But what actually happens when you are thrown into the fire? How do these two completely different mindsets hold up when the heat is actually turned up? Well, the text argues that in the furnace of adversity, the worldly mind simply cannot take affliction cheerfully. It breaks down, it panics, or just becomes incredibly bitter because its script is totally inadequate for true suffering. But the renewed mind, it can take affliction cheerfully. Think about that for a second. It is the exact same circumstance, the exact same fire, but the difference in the mind meeting that fire dictates the entire outcome. The author notes that this difference, the ability to actually face the furnace with a completely different posture, is the whole distance between the two scripts. Which leads us to ask this pretty provocative question derived directly from the text's conclusion. How do you read the fire? If the renewed mind reads the exact same flames entirely differently than the worldly mind, the challenge the text poses to its reader is to examine their own perception of hardship. Are you reading the fire as just meaningless destruction, exactly as the fast and sensible script would suggest? Or are you reading it through the lens of historical, scriptural precedent, as an environment meant to forge something enduring? We'll wrap up this explainer with a final, lingering thought taken directly from the author's accompanying Substack note. Write the words and seal with the seal of truth. The source leaves us with a real call to action to internalize this alternative way of knowing. So the next time the furnace burns and you find yourself holding two scripts, which one are you going to reach for? Will it be the one that's fast, close to hand, but ends in ruin? Or will you do the hard work of seeking out the pattern, renewing your mind and reading the fire by a completely different light? Thank you so much for joining me for this analysis, and keep seeking those answers.